let's begin with the question. The question is, worldwidely, 1 out of how many people is one Chinese? So you could say 1 out of 10, or 1 out of 7, 1 out of 5 or 3. How many do you think? Of course, you need to know the population in China. So this is how many people in China. And actually, 1 of every 5 people is Chinese. So here we said, so we 5, I'm Chinese. And you 4, there's another Chinese in China, probably. Or you 4, there's another one anywhere in the world. So every 1 out of 5 students is Chinese. So, and maybe you still think English is the worldwide most popular with a great population, the language the most population will speak. No. Chinese is the language the most native speakers. So if you do anything with China or Chinese, it's also it's very convenient to learn Chinese. At this moment, it's not the issue. So population, and then the second is geography. So I get a question very frequent from my Dutch colleague is that, in Holland, winter is very cold. So is China also cold in the winter? So the question is for you, is China also cold in the winter? If you think that's cold, raise up your hand. So, yeah, actually, have you ever thought that how big China is? It's very different. It's very different to say China as a whole. So if today you would ever learn anything, I hope that the first thing you can remember is that there is no one China. If anybody say Chinese people cannot do this, or Chinese people is very rich, or China is very poor, if they put China as a whole, that's never be right. Because China is so huge. In the north here, it's so cold as in Holland this year. I mean, they can go outside, they can go do skating, but in the south, like this, Hainan province is most south of China, and here the people are still playing on the beach, they still enjoying the summer. So it's very difficult to say such a big country to put that into a whole, to say, is that cold or not? Of course, there is also difference between Friesland and Maastricht, but not so huge as in China. So it's better always have an idea there is no one China. Also, the difference within China is very, very huge. Like those high-rising buildings, that's China, and these very shabby little houses, they're also China. I'm from north. I'm from this area, Shanxi province. So here's Beijing, and that takes maybe, here, this green part. It takes like 3 hours drive from Beijing. So very north. It's very, I would say that, and that's a very small city compared with most of huge big China cities, but there is 3 million population in my small hometown. And the difference, like between the city and the countryside, there's always a big difference between these two locations. A difference also between you say that in those big, like travel agencies of all of any other the nice photos of China. It's true. This is in Yunnan province, southwest of China. This is one place I think it's one of the most beautiful in China, and this is the dark gray, you almost see nothing. This is also China. It's in the winter, the air pollution is very serious, and this is also China. You almost see nothing. And also the difference is like you hear a lot that, how we attract more Chinese people to spend in Holland because they are so rich. Yes, they are. They waiting in the queue out of the luxurious brand, but those in this photo maybe it's not very clear to see those points. Those are the students. They are in a very remote and poor area. Those kids, they cannot have a school in the neighborhood. They need to every day climb up those mountains, and then they need to climb up there to go to their school. So our daily life, like you maybe come with your bicycle or just walk to the school, they need to climb up all of these mountains. maybe in Holland people would excited to have the mountains, but if you do that every day, no. So, and also difference of the income is also huge. Like here we say this ground part is relatively poor, and this blue part is rich part. So more darker, more poor. Like here we say Tibet, this area, and this Gansu area is poorest area in China. And all the rich area is here. So here you say there's very dark, here is Beijing, and also a very dark point here is Shanghai. And all of those cities are very rich. Maybe you know why all the rich area is on this side?
Because of shipping?
Shipping, yeah, you mean they are near the sea. 非常好. Don't care? 非常好. In fact, this is especially this area is along the sea, so it's very easy for them like to come to. Also in the early days, they come to Holland, and this area is very popular. This is a Cantonese area, and so it's very easy for them to do business. Therefore, it's get first rich, and this area, as you say, that's very remote. And maybe, I mean, when I first see this photo, I also think like, really? Where do they live? The 94% of people living beside this line. I mean, this Tengchong, this is a real little village in China, and Heihe is too, but this line is not real. It's not like in China, there's like, it's just imaginary line. And so if you check a line here, and only 6% of people lived in this big area, almost half. So maybe you also know the reason, a bit of guess why here only lives so few people, only 6%. Yeah?
There is no no life there. There's not a lot of work.
Yeah, that's true. There's not a lot of work because all of the cities and also jobs are here, or the factories are here, so they can easily to do transportation. That's a very good reason. 非常好. And still other reasons? You think that there is very few people there? There's only 6%. It must be a reason why people don't go there. Because here, you say in Tibet, they have very high altitude, 3,000, 4,000. It's not very suitable to live. And so here in this area, they also have like desert, Wustan. So it's not very appropriate. So therefore, people all go to the east. So it's a huge difference. You can never put that into. You can never say that China is very intensive populated, or there is an area there's no people. No, it all depends on where it is. Okay, the next question: is Fuyonghai a Chinese dish?
No.
Yeah, really, it's very difficult to say it is or not. It's yes or no. Fuyonghai, that exists in China, but only in one area, in Cantonese. It's a Cantonese dish. When I first time come to Holland, my parents-in-law said, "Oh, we have a very delicious Chinese restaurant. You should go there. We can get Fuyonghai and Papi Banggang." I said, "What? Why? I never heard of this in China." And when I go there, they had this Fuyonghai. I was like, "Oh, this Cantonese dishes." So it's very different than real Chinese food. Most like is like this, and also like in Holland, in the Holland Chinese restaurant, you will get is more of a combination of, like you said, Indonesia and Chinese and more of Cantonese. Because I think Cantonese, the taste is more sweet and sour. That's more suitable for the Dutch customers. Therefore, the restaurant, they are very smart. They just do what you like. So, but it's very different than the real Chinese food. Mostly it's like this. For the main courses, we already have so much. We don't have any space for the desserts. And most of the time you have this very many dishes. And then, I'm not sure you can say this is a table you can move. So you can turn, and then so you can just get some of this, and then you say, oh, I want this, and then you can turn, and this will go to somebody else. So you share all the made dishes. So we just eat together. And of course, Chinese eating in the Chinese culture is very important. So when you meet each other, you will say, "Hat goed, alles goed," and we will say, "Have you eaten?" We say, "你吃了吗?" here. So it's a very important factor in the culture, and of course there's so many variations you could eat, and so it's always like you will say, what are there? And then here you say, what did you eat? Oh, you eat noodles, and what kind of noodles? And so it's a kind of very good conversation. So eating is very important, and so for Yuli it's like, have a cup of coffee that will relax, and also with your colleagues, you want to talk anything, and let's drink a cup of coffee. But in China, you will say, do you want to eat together? So it's like this, we call it 火锅, it's called, have soup, and then you have all kinds of things you want just to cook there, sort of. And then so while you eating and you just chatting with each other, and you can just do all kinds of things and maybe talk about your contract. Everything can do during the eating. So if there's anything you want to talk with your Chinese colleagues or Chinese teachers, probably even, and you could just go eat together with them. Look, what is this? Yeah?
They always eat warm.
Yeah, very true. And we always eat warm. And in Holland, you eat twice cold. And in the morning, like I just told the colleagues that my husband, he just get a cup of cold milk in the fridge for breakfast. I just cannot understand that. I think my body will frozen. What I always have is I have this. And what's inside? It's warm water. It's so comforting. So in the morning, if you wake up and you can have a cup of warm water, and we have 3 times warm, and there's so many chances you can talk with your Chinese colleagues and teachers because the dinner and lunch has the same. Yeah. So the restaurants, they open both for lunch and dinner. It's very lucky for them. They can make business twice so much as in Holland. But while in Holland, they only have once warm eating. A lot of students, they go to China, they say, oh, I really don't want to come back because I want to stay in China and eat all of those delicious food. I can understand that. And very recently, the KLM, this airline company, they did a campaign of warm water for Chinese passengers. So this is in Schiphol. If you take train past Schiphol, you will recognize it's Schiphol. There's a huge kettle. You can say it's taller than these 2 guys, and there you can get hot water. So this Chinese tourist, while they visiting Amsterdam, they can have a cup of warm water. How nice that is. For some of the time, when I travel in Europe, I really would like to spend the same amount of money to get a cup of warm water instead of cold, for you, nice drink. Yeah, so I can imagine the Chinese travelers when they come to the Western, they really want a cup of warm water. We even give that a nice national drink. So it's just warm water without nothing.
But that's just it, Jessica? That's what you take for breakfast, or?
No. You have a lot of other things. No. You have warm water as the substitute for cold milk, and then you also have other nice things. And sometimes I think when I travel in Taiwan, you can also consider that as Chinese culture. And they have the breakfast that's during the Chinese New Year. They said they can have a kind of a traditional Chinese breakfast, the old way. When I look at the photo, I said, oh, this is like the Christmas dinner for Dutch culture. It's really a lot. I mean, I also think that's really a lot. But for the breakfast, we have saying that you eat breakfast like you are a king, and then you eat lunch as you are a prince, and dinner like you are a beggar. But nowadays, of course, in China, they also don't hold this principle because the work in the morning, they just go maybe on the street and get a kind of sort of baozi, kind of steamed bread, and with other things. So that's breakfast. And the next question, do all Chinese people speak Chinese? That's a weird question. Because we have Mandarin. That's true. We call that 普通话. It means that basically just like your ABN, standard Dutch. And we also have all kinds of, Mandarin is our national language. So that's Mandarin here. You say most of the area, they speak Mandarin. But of the national language is based on Mandarin. So in this area, they all have very different languages. And here you say all of other languages. Or in China, because China is one nation, the government prefer to call them dialects. But we don't understand each other. I mean, like I was born somewhere here, and here is the Yue, that's Cantonese, and I myself have learned Cantonese for half a year because a lot of movies and the songs, they are in Cantonese. You think it's really for my age, it's a very popular culture, so I think it's nice to learn Cantonese. So, but nowadays, I still cannot speak fluent Cantonese, no. So we don't understand each other, we need to learn the language. How different it is in Mandarin, so we just had, have you eaten? Is 你吃了吗? 你吃了吗? Have you eaten? And in Mandarin, in Cantonese here is 吃咗没? It's totally different. 吃了吗? 吃咗没? You will not. I mean, for me, it's that it's another language. From a linguistic perspective, it's also very different language because their grammar and vocabulary is all very different. So whenever you go to China and if you have learned Mandarin, a bit of Mandarin, and then what does these people speak? It's totally doesn't sound like what I have learned. It's not your fault. It's not you have learned a wrong language. It's just all the people speak their dialect. I mean, my husband already learned 5 years Mandarin, and we live here, and my parents all speak dialects. He was like, and then this is Chongqing. My brother lives here. It's very different. He was like, I have learned 5 years Mandarin, but what do you speak? So, and Chinese is a picture language. That means if you say the things and then you make a character, like they say, they sing, and then they make this character. So maybe you can guess what that means. This character. What do you think that looks like? Walking. Yeah, and is more. I mean, walking is very specific. If I say this means person, do you think that makes sense? Yes, like if person is walking like this, stand is all this, even lie down is also still links, it's also left, right, so it's still person. And this, here you can say this is all the different times they have mountain, and nowadays it was very simple. They make that simpler and simpler, so now this is just a mountain. If you know this is coming from this, it's not difficult to recognize the character, right? Yeah. And then we come to education. That's a heavy part. So education, and this is a primary school, so it's your basic school, but in China it's 6 years. So the students start with primary school when they are 7 years old. And then they have 3 years of middle school is your like underbao. And then this 9 years is compulsory education that every kids need to go through this 9 years. And then after this 9 years, you can decide whether you go to a technical school or you go into high school. The high school is like your bovenbao. So after this all together, 12 years of education, you can go to university. But before the university, you need to have a big exam. This is the most important exam of your life. Because nowadays, you need to get a university degree, especially in the competition, so severe competition in China. So this exam, we call that 高考. 高 means high, 考 means examination. So 高考 means literally that means high examination. This examination, if you can in one word to explain what it is, it's 4 scores. Which 4? Everybody needs to do mathematics, Chinese, and English. So you get 3 scores. And then you get another one, either from these 3 subjects, it's a combined subject, you get 1 score, they call that arts, or you choose this. So these 4 scores can decide whether you can go to university or or you not go to university, or which university you can go. And in China, there is 2 top universities. They are both in Beijing and Tsinghua University. So every student, they want to go to these 2 universities. So there's only...
What about the costs involved? I mean, do all people who would like to go to university, have they got the means? How is the system organized?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because some of the students, it looks that they might don't have very good financial situation. In China, I mean, if the students, their family cannot support this study, and then they can get loans from the government. And of course, it's always depends on the family. Some of the families, they even cannot imagine to get so much money borrowed from the bank. So it's also depends on how, let's say, how poor they are. So basically, you could get the loan. I mean, generally speaking, the 1-year tuition fee in China is 6,000 RMB. It's about 1,000 euro. So for most of the time, it's 4 years of study. It's like 4,000 euro. Of course, you also need money to eat and live, those things. But this 4,000 for some of the families, really remote family, like the kids, they need to climb up the mountains. I can imagine they would think that's a great amount of money. But for most of the family, if the kids want to go to university, they still can get loan from the country, and then they can pay that back after graduation.
Average income in China?
That's a very tough question, because it's very like we say, the difference between between the areas, it could be very different, because its system is very different. Like in Holland, the rich people, they pay a lot of tax, but in China, they have all the ways to avoid tax, and so the income gap is really, really huge. At this moment, if there's any idea you could get, is that the people need to pay tax if they get 3,500 RMB per month. That's about 500 euro. So if they get to this sort of minimum level, if below this, they think it's too little, you don't need to pay tax.
In the area where just 6% of the Chinese people live, I guess lots of young people there are supposed to, let's say after school, after the obligatory part, they have to help their parents, and the farmers, for instance. So one of the reasons they can't go to university is because the parents just need their children to help out on the farm, for instance.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And some of them, they even cannot finish the 9 years compulsory education because their family needs working laborers. So, and also very frequent is that a lot of young people, I mean, that's the parents, they go to those cities in that blue area to work in the factories to get more income for the family, while their kids are stay still in the village with their grandparents. So at this time, you cannot imagine there's millions of those kids. They only see their parents once a year. Yeah, so in that case, they need to help their grandparents even when they are still during the education. So nowadays, also the country wants to make this really compulsory, really verplicht for them to finish at least this 9 years. So now, according to the law, that's compulsory, but in the practice, There's still a lot of people they cannot finish that 9 years. So the young people in China, they do one important thing before university is study. It is really whole day. Like you can say the 24 hours is for study, except 7 hours or 6 hours to sleep. So, I mean, I always feel like a bit pity that I don't have a hobby. I don't really have a hobby because we didn't develop that. We didn't have the time to do that. We need to prepare for this exam, and it's much more important, seemingly, for the hobby. So that also applies to most of the Chinese young teenagers. They don't have time to develop a hobby. Yeah, I always think that when I first began to teach in Holland, I think, wow, so many vacations. It's like now I just, okay, let me wait a while. Now it's almost the May vacation. And after the May vacation, okay, let's hold tight for still another 3 or 4 weeks. Oh, it's summer vacation. And then after summer vacation, very immediately, the Herfstvakantie and Carnival. Yeah, it's just a lot of vacation. Congratulations. Yeah.
But you also use a ranking list, right?
Ranking list for this, you mean school? That's true, very good. And what we have is that we have also a sort of parents meeting, just like this. Or instead of the students, all sit with parents. And the teacher will say blah, 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 and say, oh, your kid is doing very well. He is number 1. And at the same time, there is a paper with all the ranking. So you see your kids where it is, number 1 or the last. So you will say, you really need to learn from these parents, things like that. So some of the, yeah, it's really like, wow. Like some of the students, my classmates, now I graduate for 20 years, we still get together, we say, how my parents feel and how my parents feel after this parents meeting. Sometimes the parents feel like a bit humiliated to go to the parents if your case as a last, but he might be a very nice boy or girl, just he or she is not good at studying, but that's the standard to judge if it's a good student. It's a pity, I would say. So nowadays, also of course, the young generation is also a bit different. They also learn like piano, they learn riding horse, and they have all of these fancy hobbies. But just to have a look who they are. I mean, maybe they don't need to go to university. They will just apply to a foreign university. So you don't know who they are. Nowadays, it's also very, very different because go to the Chinese university is not their only choice. Therefore, you also see a lot of international Chinese students in Holland, everywhere, America, UK. So, thank you very much for attending this and for your participation.